Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales is a 2020 launch title expansion to the 2018 Spider-Man PS4. Now, when I think of this game, I think of a debate with a homie I had about it being basically the same game. And he had a bit of a point, a little bit. But for me, this game encapsulates the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, in its totality. It offers a high quality, albeit a shorter, more story-driven experience than, 2018's version, filled with flashy, polished combat and a somewhat predictable story that totals at about 8 to 12 hours, give or take. Wait. Before the review.
Sorry to make you wait. Hope you're at peace. Special bean count!
Deal with the mail. Pay like Van Gogh. Pay like Van Gogh. Pay like Van Gogh. What they mad for? What they mad for? What they mad for? What y'all getting stashed to? Why they gas ho? Why they gas ho? Hella packs full. Hella packs full. Bitch, I got these packs full. Pay like Van Gogh. Pay like Van Gogh. Pay like Van Gogh. Bitch, I pay like Van Gogh. Why they mad? Hold up. Be like Ted. Hold up. Be ashamed. Hold up. Ain't no game. Hold up.
As far as the story goes, it is pretty well made, with some cool set pieces and sequences that can captivate if you're paying close enough attention. There isn't anything here that really throws you for a loop or keeps you all the way at the edge of your seat. There's nothing mind-boggling, or the plot twists aren't very deep. But you notice dialogue between characters and some of the minor details, such as in Miles' house when he's walking around and seeing stuff with his mom, and some of those more grounded moments kind of make this a more personal, more human experience, despite being, a Spider-Man. If you're not a fan of Spider-Man or a fan of combat action games in general, you may find this game lacking in content, or enough content that'll keep you coming back time and time again. And that's just the issue. Once you have beat this game, all you're left with is a new game plus and trophies if that tickles your fancy. Price wise, I believe this game is retailed at $49.99, and there came a bundle with the first game for around $59.99. Now this is a pretty good compromise for its shorter runtime. As I said, it's about 8 to 12 hours, give or take. The 30 frames per second lock mode has some pretty good looking graphics with the ray tracing, water on the puddles, things like that, the little things. The weather is much of the same. You can see snow and rain and things like that around the environment. It looks good in the cutscenes, just like in the combat. But I don't believe we'll really get a true PS5 title until a few years into the future, when they sort of phase out these old consoles and everyone gets up, to the new gaming console. So when I'm thinking about the sound design, I would say it's pretty top notch as with the rest of the presentation of this game. From things like your feet hitting the snow, or running around rooftops, or even combat, it all sounds pretty good and pretty realistic for what's going on. And even the music, which takes a bit of a turn, it takes some of that classic heroic, stoic Peter Parker music. It gives it a few more drums, a bit more of a hip-hop sound to give it that urban flavor, right? Now, I think it's a pretty good addition to do this. It makes sense, but for some, they would argue Miles is a bit of a token Peter Parker, which is a pretty fair assessment. But I find in any Hollywood-level game like this, you're not really going to get an authentic Harlem, New York nigga, native, whatever you want to use, right? You're not going to get it. It's just not going to happen. I believe they did just enough to make Miles stand out a bit from Peter, as far as being, more of an urban black nerd rather than just Peter Parker. And one thing that I would also agree with is Miles' voice can be a little annoying.
In a sec.
You remember the code, right?
The Fibonacci sequence.
Nice.
A reward.
I mean, our energy converter was pretty fire.
Truth. You think it's still on display at the Science Center?
Hope so. Wow. Look at this. Goober Central.
It's a little squeaky, little teenager type voice. I mean, I get it, but it can be a bit tiresome after a while. Now he does mix in some urban slang like "time to dip for the cops to get here" or "that was fire," little shit like that. But I mean, he kind of talks like this, "Wow, guys," type shit. I don't know, it's a little Hollywood, a little nerdy, a little too nerdy. Now I would ask, what have they done to make Miles stand out from Peter besides behavior and music? Is it really the same game? Like I said before, it feels a bit like a spin-off. Think the Batman Arkham series, when they brought in Robin or Nightwing or wherever else. They don't fight exactly like Bruce, but you can't really revolutionize the controls too much. What are you gonna do? There's only a few buttons on the controller. So in that regard, I would say Miles, he has a few different things that make him stand out. They give him the Venom power and they give him invisibility. Now, these two things sort of change the game decently. There's certain enemies you can only sort of really get an edge on, either by getting behind them or by smacking them with the Venom power. Boom. It gives this nice dynamic where you'll be in combat, you'll knock some enemies around with the electricity, and then boom, you'll get hit. You'll have to run, turn invisible, wait for them to sort of forget, and then come back, go into stealth, and then start to loop all over again. And it's very interesting how the enemies sort of shoot blindly when you're invisible. They look for you. Things like that really make you feel like Spider-Man. And that's where this game has always been that game. Trust me. On the top difficulty where any real gamer is going to play, right? This game gives you a bigger dynamic of being Spider-Man as far as movement and gameplay. But enemy types are more or less the same, minus a few variations here or there with the underground. Roxxon, they're pretty much reskins, more or less. I mean, they're humans, so you kind of expected humans, guns, etc. That's what you're going to see. To me, these enemies create a visual difference while retaining many of the same weaknesses as each other, so they don't stand out too much. Like if you got the enemies with the big fist, and those are the ones where you can hit with the Venom power to break it. There's some with chain swords, there's some with these slight differences that give it a nice variety. I mean, they stick pretty consistent to the rest of the game, but that's not too much of a problem considering what they're games. They're part of the same organizations, groups, etc. Like the shield enemies, they work like on the first game, and every variation pretty much is the same except for the heavy shield enemies, who you have to break their shield with Venom, and then you come in and do your Spider-Man thing. Now, one thing I did notice is with the animations. Miles' animation reflect his newer, more Spider-Man, shorter, youthful sort of style.
He saw us! Take him out!
Those better be water guns. If they're not, I guess I had to stop you.
You're shooting! I can't see him! What's he doing there?
I am on your side. We can take down Roxxon with what we know about Newform.
It won't work! No one cares!
Her sword stuck. Time for Venom.
He kind of throws himself into his punches rather than Peter's, a bit of an adult. He's been doing it a while. He can kind of hit enemies around a little bit differently. So you can kind of see that when he's fighting bigger, taller opponents, how you notice he's smaller, right? You notice these things. The way he fights, he's a little bit more reliant on his power and his gadgets. You can see that in the game. You get hit, on the hardest difficulty, you sort of take that damage. So it feels like you're a newer Spider-Man. You've got to do all these things to kind of get ahead. And that's where it really shines. I like that small amount of detail that I don't think a lot of people will notice if they haven't really played the first game and sort of just watched and really understood what's going on there. Now, they give you a Spider-Man app in the game, which is sort of how they handle most of the side quests. I think it's a cool idea for somebody who might be a teenager who has a friend who develops apps and they do things like that. Now, there's some plot holes and things you could dig into if you wanted, but without getting into all of that, I think they delivered a high-quality short experience, probably affected by COVID. They probably dropped this just to have something for next gen, just to say, here you guys go. But at the end of the day, if you're a fan of Spider-Man and you want to play something cool, I think this is a good option. Just a short experience, something fun to have and go back to. If you haven't played the first game, go ahead, get the bundle with the other one, enjoy, be Spider-Man, play your games, handle your business outside of gaming, and when you come home and you just want to sit down and beat somebody up, I think this is a good experience for that.
He's got a shock attack! You can't stop us,
If you're interested but don't really care too much, wait till there's a dip in price. It'll come down eventually. Pick it up, enjoy, have fun, swing around. Everything feels good, it's top notch, all of that stuff together. And yeah, that's been pretty much it for the review. Like, comment, subscribe, you know, all that good stuff, and have fun. Say the bed's a poor man's opera. Any beats I'm on, I gotta doctor 'em. If life's a test and God's proctoring, I only kick it truthful like the heat from the sun. Only call the kettle black when we talking funds. They say a friend of all is really a friend of none. You gotta pick a side, that's what they telling us, son. You dropping the ball, living aimless. Yeah, that's a life that's lost. They say fire that's kept closest burns the most of us all. And most are women living with the fear of assault. They never wanna mention that's a fear that's taught. The rope around the neck is like the shit stays taut. And fuck a 9 to 5, I'm gonna be my own boss. You cannot live in life if you can't cope with a loss. They say with hat, life must fade. So focus and stop living life in the day. You know what they say. You know what they say. Oh, you know what they say. You know how the saying go. You know how the saying go. You know what they say. Yeah, you know what they say.